Welcome to the Somatic Movement Summit, a free online event where you'll learn from leading experts how to embody all of yourself through the medicine of movement. Share this powerful program with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Brian Siddhartha Engel.
Welcome everybody to this very special session with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. She is a movement artist, researcher, founder of the Body-Mind Centering System. She is an educator and therapist, and her approach to movement and consciousness is quite unique. An innovator and leader, her work has influenced the fields of bodywork, movement, dance, yoga, body psychology, childhood education, and many other mind-body disciplines. Bonnie, it is absolute pleasure to have you here today. How are you doing?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I'm fine. It's an early morning, sunny in California.
Wonderful. Bonnie, the first question I would like to ask you is, how did you get started with working from the inside on your somatic journey?
Probably in the womb. My mother was a dancer. I also grew up in the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, which in those days was the entertainment in America in the early 40s. She said I danced in the womb, but meanwhile she was dancing the womb. And movement has always been a part of my life through dance. And I was very fortunate to have wonderful teachers in dance. And then in high school, we actually had dance every day for physical education with a woman that I would like to do research on. I suspect that she also came from a somatic background, perhaps through the lineage of Genevieve Stebbins. So that's a name for people to look up who are interested in the history of somatics in dance. She lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and born in California, but worked and taught in the Boston and New York area. And my teacher was from that Boston, Massachusetts area. And so our classes were not about technique, about a particular form, but about moving with weight, space, time, feeling the movement emotionally and personally. Then later I trained with Eric Hawkins, who was a master of movement and looking at natural movement. Through him, I met Andre Bernard, who comes through the lineage of Barbara Clark, Mabel Ellsworth Todd, and I think perhaps they can also be traced to Genevieve Stebbins. I'm skipping many people. Then I also studied with Irmgard Bartiniev in the Laban work. And I studied with Berta Bobath and Dr. Bobath in London, who developed neurodevelopmental therapy, working with children and adults with brain dysfunction. And I found out later that Berta Bobath studied with a student of Ilse Gindler, and Ilse Gindler studied with a student of Genevieve Stebbins. I also feel that probably Anna Halprin, through her teacher, might also be traced back to Genevieve Stebbins. Sensory awareness, the work coming out of Ilse Gindler, arose there. So my background is not just my own, but those of my teachers and everyone who studies with me has become my teacher. I've worked for over 50 years with infants and children with neurological challenges, as well as professional dancers and athletes. And so those children and their families have taught me what is movement? What is movement? And how does it underlie who we are? It's not like this is pathological and this is good and this is bad. Of course, things are more efficient and more comfortable and more naturally effortless. But it's the same for all of us, the pathway to that. So I've spent my teenage and adult life, now my late 70s, looking for what is this natural way that we have the possibility of moving when we release the restriction. So not focusing on the restrictions, but focusing on the organicity that underlies it.
Thank you for that. And another question I wanted to ask you was, why is the language of movement fundamental to our development?
If there was no movement, we would never have created a body. The egg of us was in our mother when she was an embryo inside of her mother. So our first conduit to the outer world is actually through our maternal grandmother, that culture, that the process of her life, and then through our mother's life. Meanwhile, our sperm from our father also has a primordial beginning there, but it forms very quickly and has a very short life and is very about movement. And so our egg is this breathing for a very long time. Perhaps when we meditate, it's coming back to the mind of that presence. But our sperm is moving and it's quick and it doesn't live very long. It's in the now. It's not in this forever now, but in this momentary now. And when the sperm is ejected out of the testes, it's also drawn to something that it doesn't yet know, but it knows that it's going there. And it doesn't know till it sees this corona radiata around the egg, this light that now I know the destiny that I've been going toward from the moment of existence. And meanwhile, the egg is still present. And at that moment of meeting, the destiny, the path of destiny is known, but not until that moment. So the movement, without the movement of inner stillness, it's not, of course, I don't know in death what movement there is, but in terms of life, it's very living through breath, through breathing, the cell. And the movement of the sperm is an external moving. And we know we're on our path of life, but we don't really know until we get to each moment what it is. And that alchemy of meeting is transformation. So the egg and the sperm, in a certain way, die. They leave their form and create us. We come from this dynamic of stillness and motion. So when you say movement includes stillness. and movement. And then as the embryo develops, it's through movement. And our first cranial nerve to myelinate is that which is registering movement. We have to know the movement of the relationship of all the parts. And that lasts through our whole life until we go back to the stillness, which we don't know until we're there.
Thank you. I'm also thinking about the function of cell and the intelligence of the cell. And in Bruce Lipman's epigenetics, he talks about the brain of the cell being in the membrane. It's an organic information process, so almost like a liquid crystal semiconductor. So the cell is in relation to the interstitial space or its environment. In the same way, us humans have our skin, and from embryology, our skin and our nervous system come from the same place in our development. I'm just wondering, how do you think about epigenetics and the idea of skin and nervous system working together in relation to the environment, giving the information? It's not the gene, but it's the environment that's really affecting us.
I can't really speak about epigenetics. It's outside of my field in terms of those words and the genes. I would approach it from the cellular consciousness and nervous system consciousness. Our culture in modern times, which we are living in, is very focused on the nervous system in terms of research and genes. My research has been really looking at cellular consciousness in relationship to nervous system consciousness. So I'm studying both. And I began my studies of formal anatomy when I was 16 in high school with a special course in scientific research. There were 12 of us for a year who could choose a topic, and I chose a dissection of a cat, mainly looking at bones and muscles, but also seeing the organs, learning about the nervous system, the brain. And then in college, studying a couple of years of anatomy as part of my occupational therapy degree. And then it continued through my life. So the gross anatomy was where I started. But I began to see as a dancer in the 1960s that what I was seeing was more than the muscles and the bones. What I was feeling, how do you express different things? It's not just about how do you move your limbs and how do you use your muscles. And that led to an exploration of the organs. Preceding that, I had studied with Yogi Ramaya in the late 1960s, about 68, I believe it was. He came to New York from India, from his center outside of what was then Madras. And he talked about the organs, that if you did a posture, that it had to do with the organs, where they were the keystone. I forgot basically everything, not a lot, of which postures were which organs. But as an improvisational dancer, I would say, well, my heart, and I started in my heart. What postures? So it's not just forward, backwards, side bending, twist, but what are the possibilities so that it becomes more like the ancient Indian sculptures, which are very spiralic, and also in all the three planes. But if I went to my liver, that's something else. Not pushing, but moving. And then that led eventually to what are the cells? What does it feel like in the blood vessels. What does the blood feel like? What does the lymph feel like? Synovial fluid, interstitial fluid. That all of these different fluids and cells have consciousness. I can get lost here, so I'm thinking the cell. So if you place your hand, someone watching here, if you place your hand on your shoulder, I would like to almost say the same one. You can do the other for now, but I have a reason for saying the same one. And we pause and breathe back to the egg. We can perceive many things, the skin, the muscles, the flesh. We can also perceive our lungs. And just breathing in the lungs as cells, alveoli. We can go down even to the alveoli. And we feel how we are breathing in this upper lobe. We go to the middle lobe, including the breast. The breath breathes. The breast breathes. And then we go to the lower lobe, which is more in the back. We take this process slowly. We can feel how we're breathing in each of the lobes of the lungs. And then we can take that sensation and initiate movement from any one of those lobes. So instead of just lifting, okay, this is a movement, lift your arms. No, use your lungs. Then add your lymph or your interstitial. That we can begin to know through consciousness where in the body we are. And that goes to all the cells as just cellular or specific cells. So how do I put together what I was just explaining, or hopefully through movement, because that's my first language, not the words. I was very, very late in speaking and stuttered, and I still stutter sometimes. Having done that exploration, if one wishes to do it, then you can distinguish, are you moving your scapula, your shoulder girdle? Are you moving your lungs? And then your heart is a ball inside of that socket. You can move your heart. Not press it forward and pull it back, but move it. So if I go to the side, here I'm pressing forward to my heart, which is actually where the pulmonary circulation is. We're actually cutting off between our lungs and our heart, and that we move our heart backward. I'm on a ball, I may go rolling onto the floor. That's very different than pressing. There's no pressing, it's yielding. And then my heart brings me back. If I come back with my hip joint, I'll be here. If I come back with my heart, I'm lifting, but I'm not pulling up anything, lifting my sternum. It's about movement. The delight of the movement, and the lungs are a socket over the ball in the heart, and my heart moves inside. That changes the nervous system. It gives the brain more information. On the other hand, our brain directed us to the lung or the heart. So they're in dialogue. I see the nervous system as a recording system. It takes whatever's happening in the cells all over the body and it organizes it in a pattern. And then we have the patterns, we can say, of our habits. Sometimes habits have a bad reputation, but if we didn't have habits, we'd have to reinvent every moment. Excuse me. There's a dialogue. Our nervous system can direct us through imagery, through words, through the patterns themselves, and then our cells add new information. And so I see people who can't move, who learn to move, or who move like this, they can't control to moving like this, where there's more information opening the pathways that were closed down for some reason. It's not the answer to everything, obviously, but it holds a lot of potentiality for our everyday movement and for healing. Also for this virus that we are is traveling across the earth through land and sea and air. Just feeling, opening yourselves to how they breathe, how you free the fascia, the glue that allows the virus to connect to, how we open that, I don't know. Possibility, it's potential. And it's up to each of us, the answers and the questions. This is my experience. Each person has their own.
Well, yes, I just kept shifting my attention to the different areas that you were directing in terms of interstitial space or heart or shoulder blade. And I noticed the quality of the movement changed when I just put my awareness on that particular part or body system. So, and it was very instantaneous. I just immediately put my attention there and something shifts and changes in the quality of the movement. So I was surprised how fast that could happen. I could just think the thing and the movement would change and the quality of the movement would change. It was very, very fast, shifting between systems. I worked with you a long time ago, but I'm a little out of practice with your system, but I thought it would take me a while to get back into it. But it was really there for me and very easy to follow your direction. The other question I wanted to ask you was about the central axis to the bodies of the vertebrae and the discs in terms of this still point and how the periphery spirals around this midline and still point. And in my osteopathic biodynamic background, we talk about this midline and stillness and the movement of the breath of life from this still point. Could you share any words of wisdom on that or lead us through an experience, whatever's coming to you, Bonnie?
Embryology is one of my fields of inquiry. And I mentioned the egg and the sperm. When they come together, they begin to form a ball of cells. Each cell divides into the next. They divide. And so you have something called a morula. And I'll just leave it with that. And at one point, the morula flat. There's other things that happen in the between. But for now, we'll just say at some point, there's a flattening and we create two layers. So these two layers, I'll say the yellow is the front layer and the blue is the back layer. And from the front layer, we create our digestive organs and our respiratory organs. They're our organs of breathing. So the food from the digestive organs, the sugar, the glucose, and the oxygen of the breathing have a combustion in each cell for the energy. That's how we have the energy for our cellular processing throughout our body. So this yellow doesn't have to be yellow. I chose yellow. Is where we have this soft organ, life force, energy processing. Then the back layer, which would be the back body, approaching it that way, develops into skin and nervous system. Our means in a way to the outer world. On the other hand, the skin has two basic layers. All membranes have two layers, human, except for bacteria, blue-green algae. They may have only one layer, but basically we're a planet of two layers. There's an inner-looking membrane to the inner part of to us, and the outer membrane, the epidermis, to the outer world, dermis, to the inner world, and they come from different layers. So meanwhile, this front body and back body, and this is where I differ somewhat from the traditional, because my research is not looking at the embryo itself. I've never seen an embryo externally. It's coming through consciousness of the process. So what I'm saying is coming out of the embodiment process, not out of the external look. That the middle body, then, which is red, arises from the perineum and comes up through the center. So at one point we were 3 layers. And the reason I said it's not traditional in terms of the external study is most people who are studying embryology are looking at the mesoderm, or the middle body, coming from the back body. This is a long process. How do I say it in a few sentences? That through experience, the back body creates the form, but the front body creates the movement. So we have form and flow. That might take longer to detail more. But meanwhile, the middle body develops a central axis called the notochord. So when you mentioned the stillness of the still point inside, or in yoga, when we speak of the Sushumna Nadi and being in the center of the body, we did, as an embryo, have a central axis exactly in the middle of the body when we were just 3 layers. So we have actually experienced this notochord, which starts at the perineum. There's a perineal body that's in front of the anus, either between the anus and the vagina or the anus and the penis. And that perineal body is the is the source of this middle body. So I'm not using my legs to jump up. I'm using this perineal body to spring. And it goes right up through the center. So it's this axis here. And then there are these 2 layers, not 2 layers, I used the wrong word. I have to pause to find my verbal language. 2 sheaths on either side of the notochord that forms other columns. And the very lateral column is where we get our arms. We develop our arms and our legs, our face below our eyes, and our vocal structure. So this is a limb. Our face is not our central axis. Our brain came off the back body. Our neural tube, the central nervous system, came off the back body. Our face, our vocal structure, our arms and our legs, they came off the middle body. The inside of our mouth to our anus came off the front body. And this middle notochord around which the embryo organizes by the calibrating distance. There's so many principles here. Let me pause. What I mean by calibrating distance is if you take your two hands, you just hold them with no calibrating. But if you open to the magnetic field between them, there's an energy field here. Now, we can move our hands to compress that energy field and also to release it out. So we can say there are molecules in this energy ball. We can make a ball, make a square, but energy moves in waves. So our hands are releasing and compressing, which is different than just moving your hands together and apart. But also the space can throw us apart and pull us together. That the consciousness of space itself has wisdom. But you go, but it's outside of my body. How do I feel space? It's about consciousness. We are internal space and external space, and space knows itself. Before there was an Earth and planets, there was space. So we can look at the planets bending space, or we can look at space bending the planets. I really went off here. I don't know if it made any sense at all, but that's my exploration of consciousness.
Is your experience the same from the biodynamic? Is your experience the same as the biodynamic model, where we have this stillness from the midline, and there's a movement laterally and also headward in the slow tide, and it recedes back to the midline? We call it the movement of health, or the long tide. Is that something you work with as well in your system?
I don't from that perspective of calling it the long tide, because I didn't learn it from the long tide. One osteopath, in feeling something else I was doing, said she had never felt so clearly the long tide, but I didn't learn it as the long tide. But I feel the movement from the center to the periphery, and the periphery coming back. And there's an organization, I feel very strongly this organization around the space of the central axis, which is no longer a structure. The notochord directs the organization of all of the body forming. At the same time, I have here two more toys. I've read that the notochord has the consistency of a firm grape, a fluid-filled grape. And I have this toy here that's not filled with fluid, but it has this wave expandability. It's fun to play with, to then play with the movement and the axis. One of the things that, excuse me, one of the things that happens if this is it's a spiralic flow. If we look at it as the Sushumna Nadi in yoga, it's space. It's not a structure, it's space. But then I said there are these sheaths. They develop into 3 columns. And the innermost column, called the paraaxial, actually forms around the axis, and that forms our vertebral column. And remnants of the notochord remain in the internal discs. And then they're, so we can approach the notochord by going back in memory to the notochord. We were there. It's not like something happened and then all of a sudden we appear. Consciousness didn't stop. The egg and the sperm died away. Their form disappeared, but the memory is there if one wishes to pursue it. One can also deny it and call it a metaphor, and that's fine. Each of us finds it in our own way. So to find the notochord, we can go to this central place and feel it, how it's organizing by calibrating. I think I left the piece off there. That space is calibrating us as well as we are calibrating space. So our body is forming through this calibrating of space. For example, the heart, it has a primary field and a secondary field. It depends on its relationship to the notochord if that secondary field will develop. And how far the limbs are from these different calibrating measurements. We grew from our tips. We didn't grow from the shoulders. We grew from the tips. And the further our fingertips went from the root, then the root could create form from this kind of unformed mesenchyme. I am jumping around. I have this toy to show that the vertebrae are segmented, where the notochord is not segmented. So when we're going to the central notochord, and whether you're doing it through hands-on or doing it through movement or doing it through stillness, opening that awareness, not creating it, it already exists. It will reveal itself. So your long curve, I forget what you called it, the long wave maybe. It exists. We just need to open to it. We may call it a different name.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Bonnie. The other question I wanted you to maybe even lead us through an exercise on this one. Could you speak of how we initiate movement through awareness rather than producing an external movement?
That's a very good question. And there are many, many things to do. Let me think of. Make a fist and do that several times. And just notice what you notice. Then place your thumb, or maybe just we could do it with just one hand so we can compare. So make a fist. Then place your thumb inside of your palm and let your fingers fold over. So this is nervous system directing a learning process. So now make a fist with your thumb. Now feel how your thumb presses into the palm and the palm pulls your thumb. And now make a fist several times by feeling that your palm and thumb have a magnet pulling them together, and they pull so strong that they squeeze your thumb out. Now make a fist. Did it change how you made your fist from the first fist to the last one? What did you feel? What do you feel? So the second one, the thumb is actually out again, so it's the same kind of fist. But we started with this, by the way, is a fetal fist. This is the first fist. And the thumb comes out. But then we can have another fist. rather than just this. Take your time.
When I bring my thumb in to the fingers, there's a lot more of awareness engaged more, and I'm more careful with it. And when I do it the other way, it's not as interesting because the other way is new to me, and I have to really think about it. That's what's coming to me right now.
Mm. This is also an exploration of tone that, or do it with your other hand and see what you feel. That with the thumb and the palm is the way that the baby and the fetus, not born yet, although some babies are born still with their thumb here, of building up tone. So the other hand, so even if you go like really make a fist, what's the strength of the one that you've been exploring if you just did one of building up the tone of your thumb, and the other one in which you didn't build up the tone? So with your other hand, bring in your thumb and build up the tone between your palm and your thumb. This is about tone. And then squeeze it out, which because of the injury as a child, I've only been able to do this with my thumb in the last few months. My hand as a child was like this. Now I can't fully open it. That's pretty good. Only taken almost 70 years. So there's a sensitivity of feeling, but then there's also a tonal. What's the tonal weight that passes through the body? And the hands are a key, and the feet, for creating tone. If our hands are like this, and we have to use more local muscles, if we have this tone. As an old lady, maybe I'm having trouble getting up. We have that myth. But if I have tone, I'll go out of the picture.
Well, actually, I had a discussion about you with one of our common students, and I was asking her what would be a good question to ask you. And I'm just thinking about the way you are throughout this whole talk. And she said you've got the capacity to hold the space of love. And I've heard this and I've experienced this myself. Could you talk a little bit of what is that? How do you create that feeling of safety in a big field of love and safety for me right now, even though I'm not with you in presence physically with you, and we're students in the group and just wherever you are? How do you accomplish that? Is that from all your years of practice, or it's a beautiful thing? Maybe you could just end with a few words around that.
First of all, I don't know. And I thank you. If you feel that way, I'm happy. I feel that way with you. So, and though it's my first time on Zoom, I feel that I'm held by those of you watching. Otherwise, you would have turned it off. Thank you. I'm very influenced by everything, but in particular in this situation by two grandmothers. My maternal grandmother was Jewish, growing up in New York City. So the quintessential American Jewish grandmother, full of, and I was her only granddaughter, just full of bloodful love. And my paternal grandmother was in the Midwest. She was Quaker and a farm woman and of the earth. And from the age of 3, I remember, there was probably earlier, she began to teach me the Bible. And the first thing she taught me was, God is love. And so through my years of childhood, memorizing special verses, reading the Bible. And she had a little plaque over my bed that said, whatever good that I may do, let me do it now. For it is true, I shall not pass this way again. And between these two grandmothers, as well as my parents and others, they infused in me being in love. One more blood, just heart, squeeze you to death, eat you up kind of love. And the other was this, do your best always now. Be your best. Care for others. Care for yourself. I don't know if there's so much care for yourself, but she cared. I remember once her killing a rattler that she had many grandchildren. And there was a rattler there, and one ran in, and I remember her with a rake. I don't know if it was a rake or I think it was a shovel, killing the rattler. A woman of action. And of growing food. And prayer.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you very much for sharing that. It's very insightful to know you more as a person and how you are, the way you are, and maybe even how you moved through your life in what you're doing when this place of deep love that was taught to you from a very young age by both grandparents. So thank you for your presence. Thank you for your blessings. And thank you for sharing all your wisdom with us today. It's been an absolute honor to be with you in this moment and listen to your words. I feel so happy that this could have happened. Is there a website where anybody can contact you?
Yes, we have a website called bodymindcentering.com. There's also another website that's ready to, I don't use computers, so I have to pause at the right word, but it's about to be finished, in which we will have streaming. And that's called BonnieBainbridgeCohen.com. So bodymindcentering.com, which will also take you to body mind centering license programs, which I think now are happening in 18 countries. And it will take you to their programs. And it will also, you'll find a link to the Body Mind Centering Association, which is the professional membership, but one can also join as a student or to show interest. They have forums, wonderful journal, conferences. And there you can find a list of professional members and what they have to offer privately and in workshops. Many, many. I'm losing a word there. Many what? Many somethings for you.
Opportunities.
Thank you. Opportunities. And thank you very much. And I wish everyone well in this time in particular, although we are always facing difficulties. We know we're in this one together and that we can hold dearly. Thank you. Be well.
Thank you, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. It's been an absolute pleasure.
For me also, thank you.
Thank you for joining the Somatic Movement Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit somaticmovementsummit.com. To learn more about our global programs, to support you in waking up in all the areas of your life and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this embodied path to vitality and wholeness with your friends and family.